Hi Internet, my name's Dave, and welcome to the first video of Macabre Comics. This is a little different. It's just kind of an experiment that I'm trying because first and foremost, I am terrible when it comes to technology. I'm one of those guys that you could sit me down, you could explain exactly what it is I need to do, and it's going to sound like white noise. It's going to go in one ear and out the other. So I'm trying to do this because I'm also a writer. And getting my work out there isn't the easiest thing in the world, as I'm sure many writers know. It's a bit of a struggle to try and create something and then put it out for the world to just sink their teeth into and see what they think. So, what I'm doing is creating a video audiobook, if you will. Now, just right off the bat, there's not going to be a lot going on here. Like this is a video, but first and foremost, this is an audiobook. So if you're watching, you're not going to be super entertained. This is purely for the sake of listening. So keeping that in mind, I'll just give you a brief explanation as to what it is I'm doing here. This is a book series that I want to write. This is an original comic book-esque story that I've come up with. And it's going to be multiple books. I'm not sure how many right now, but the overarching title of them is Macabre Comics. I haven't drawn anything, I haven't created any speech bubbles. This isn't a typical comic book story. This is just me narrating what it is I've got going on. So if you enjoy superhero stories and you want to jump into a completely new one, you want to listen to a bit of an audiobook that I've got going on, great, welcome. If you don't enjoy it, you don't like the genre at all, bye. You might as well not watch this because that's what this is. So, all of that being said, welcome to Macabre Comics. Book 1 is called The Masks of New Zenith. You'll understand why a little later on. This book series jumps from one character to the next, so you get to see the whole story from various different viewpoints. I'm going to warn everybody right now, this isn't a, campy kind of hokey, like the 1960s, oh, this guy is a vigilante, this guy's trying to rob a bank, he's going to stop him, and there's a bit of conflict. No, it's not like that. There's a very darker aspect to this, a much more mature kind of feel to it. This is not juvenile fiction, this is adult fiction. Like anyone younger, like parents, if you happen to see that your kids are watching this and they're like 13 or younger, so there's going to be some themes involved in this that you might not want them checking out. I'm just forewarning you right now, okay? Don't say that I didn't warn you, because I did. One more thing, the way that this works is each of the chapters are different viewpoints, but each of the chapters are named after what I think the actual comic book issues would be called of these characters. So that being said, might as well just jump right into it. Macabre Comics, Book 1, The Masks of New Zenith. Prologue. Heads or tails? Word to the wise about cleaning up vomit. Grinning from ear to ear negates the gag reflex. Ellie Green had learned that when she was a teenager and had to take care of a sick friend at a Halloween party. One of her girlfriends, Michelle, had brought a Mickey of vodka and, like the idiot teenager she was, drank it straight for most of the evening. After a few short hours, it all came back up and landed right on her mother's carpet. Ellie had been pissed, and the party had crawled to a standstill while she tried to clean it up. She just couldn't stand the smell. Vodka mixed with nacho cheese, mixed with some Chinese takeout, mixed with, well, vomit. Didn't make for a fun combination. The whole thing made her want to puke. But what was she supposed to do? She couldn't let it sit there until the smell just went away and became a permanent fixture of her parents' basement. Fortunately, Kyle Albrecht had the solution. He was the charismatic, devil-may-care member of their close group of friends, the guy who would eventually go on to see the world and dodge immigration every step of the way as he illegally hopped from border to border through any unguarded dirt path he could find. "Grin," he had told her as she slaved away with carpet cleaner and a scrubbing pad. "Grin like a maniac. Hell, grin like a psychopath. When you grin really wide like that, the gag reflex gets nullified. It'll still smell a little gross, but you won't feel like you want to puke at all." He hadn't helped her. No one had. It wasn't their carpet that might get stained. But goddamn if he hadn't been right. Ellie managed to get the stain out, and her folks had never been the wiser. So, on a night like tonight, when Ellie was standing in the men's bathroom of Green's bar with a mop in hand and puke all over the floor, she could be found grinning from ear to ear like a maniac, thinking about Kyle the whole time. About 30.5 years had passed since that night, but she always thought of him when she had to clean up after her more ambitious patrons. She had bought up Green's after her dad died. Back then it had been named 777 and had a bright neon sign with 3 playing cards to advertise. It had been pretty divey when she bought it, a local hole in the wall that only stayed in business to let the neighborhood junkies come in and smoke up without being harassed. Ellie's future had been looking pretty bleak at the time, but never one to quit, she figured she may give it a shot. After all, her ancestors were from Ukraine and Ireland. She always figured 2 things she was great at were drinking and fistfights. She had taken her inheritance and flipped the place over, chasing out the riffraff and establishing a whole new clientele. And she was damn proud of herself for doing it, too. In fact, since re-establishing Green's as the most popular bar of the North, the neighborhoods had started to turn around. Very slowly, of course. There were still a few slummier locations the further north you went. Sadly, though, no matter how well kept a bar is, there will always be the odd straggler who thinks they have that iron stomach and goes over their limit. Tonight's lucky target was named Carl Wilkes. Ellie had served him before and knew he didn't mean any trouble. He just had a bit of an issue with impressing people. The guy loved to reel him in and tell stories about how he once drank an entire bottle of 40% vodka in 3 minutes without stopping. And who knows? Maybe he had 30 years ago when he still had his hair and all his teeth. But not while in his 50s. Eventually, someone would call him out on it, and Carl would try to prove his wild and ridiculous claims. Now, normally a bartender would refuse to acknowledge something so idiotic, and normally Ellie was the one behind the bar who would do this. But sadly, one of Ellie's employees was a rough-around-the-edges idiot named Jeff who loved making money off poor deluded drunks like Carl Wilkes. He probably sold him a bottle for double what it's worth and kept most for himself. Ellie lived above the bar. The place came with a 1-bedroom spacious apartment when she bought it. And the best part was how soundproof it was. On her days off, she could stay home if she wanted to and never heard the crowd from below. But she heard the pounding at her door that night. She flung it open, eager to kick whoever it was back down the flight of stairs they had just climbed, and saw Jeff's face wide-eyed and red with worry. "You gotta come now!" he cried out. The moron was more than capable of causing a problem, but God help him when it came to fixing one. Carl Wilkes hadn't even made it to the toilet. He was flat on his stomach with vomit trickling out of his unconscious mouth and onto the bathroom floor. The ambulance attendants couldn't guarantee that he'd live, but they rushed him to the hospital anyway. That night, Carl Wilkes almost lost his life, and Jeff Tannen lost his job. "Get the fuck out of New Zenith!" Ellie had yelled at him as she kicked him out of the door. "You're a scummy piece of shit, and I'll make sure you never serve in this city again." She shut the place down early that night. She couldn't get back to sleep now anyway. Not with that much excitement at 12:45 in the morning. So she grabbed the mop and bucket and got to work, grinning from ear to ear and staring down at vodka-smelling vomit once again. Not the first time. Wouldn't be the last. "Oh, Kyle," she thought to herself. "If you only knew how much that advice has helped over the years." She often wondered what happened to her old friend. Odds are he was off the coast of a tropical beach somewhere, with $40 in his pocket, 5 enemies out to kill him, and a big grin on his own well-tanned face. Ding-ka-ling! Ellie's ears perked up when she heard the bell. "What the hell?" she whispered. She leaned the mop against the wall and stepped out of the bathroom. Sure enough, someone had walked into the bar. Ellie thought for sure she had locked it, but it was so late that she guessed there was a chance she had imagined it. "Sorry, sir, but we're closed early tonight. Got a bit of a mess I'm dealing with." The man turned to look at her. He looked like he had driven too far north and missed the Las Vegas exit by a few states. His suit jacket looked like it was made of crocodile skin, and he had an equally flamboyant cowboy hat to match. The boots were brown, and the belt buckle was a set of dice with silver-colored flames around them. Ellie felt a little less than put together by comparison, what with her shawl, rubber gloves, and boot combination. But the clothes all failed in comparison to the eyes. Ellie nearly gasped when she saw them, and he noticed. "There a problem, ma'am?" the stranger asked. No, she quickly recovered. I thought maybe the lights were playing tricks on me, but your eyes... Oh, yes, I know." He gestured to his face and took a few steps towards her. "Trust me, I'm used to it by now. I assure you there's no cause for alarm. I am quite healthy." Ellie got a closer look when he approached. The light was definitely not playing tricks on her. It was legitimate. Violet eyes, and bright too, like two small Christmas lights on a face. "A very rare birth condition. It's a genetic thing, nothing more." The stranger stuck out his hand. "Name's Dennis Zebb. Just got to New Zenith earlier tonight, and I haven't quite adjusted to the different time zone yet." After a moment or two of hesitation, Ellie took his hand and returned his firm handshake, with one of equal strength. She had always been stronger than most other women she knew. Plenty of other men, too. "Ellie Green," she spoke calmly with a small hint of a smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Zebb. But as I said, I've had to close early tonight. There's been a bit of a mess, and I'm a little understaffed, so I've had to clean it up myself." Zebb looked over her shoulder to the open bathroom. "What happened in there?" he asked. "One of my regulars played a game with himself. He wanted to see if he could drink a whole bottle without dying. I had to fire the idiot bartender that let him do it. Fortunately, he sprayed it all up in my bathroom, so there's a chance he may live yet." "Well, that's good," Dennis Zebb said. "That would be an awful way to go. A man shouldn't waste his time at the end of a bottle when there's so many more ambitious pursuits in life." Ellie gave a small nod. "Well said, Mr. Zebb, even though you're saying it after having walked into a bar." He gave a small crack of laughter, briefly shutting those hypnotic eyes and throwing his head back. "Yes, I suppose I have," he agreed. The two heard a small grumbly stirring from behind the bar and looked over to see the tiny frame of a waddling hound dog come out. Duke had been Ellie's closest friend for just over 10 years now. He was the unofficial mascot of Green's, and Ellie had let him down there tonight to keep her company while she cleaned up. As a puppy, Duke had been a yappy little mutt that would have alerted the whole neighborhood to someone coming into the bar. Now, though, he was slowly going blind and barely made a peep. "Some guard dog you are," Ellie insulted. Duke just looked in her general direction, his two foggy eyes and pouty demeanor too adorable to get mad at. He gave a small sneeze and shook his big, floppy ears back and forth before walking over to Mr. Zebb. "Hello, little one," Dennis said as he knelt down to scratch the dog's head. Duke gave his hand a small sniff and let the man rub his side. "Oh, aren't you just a precious little thing? I love animals. They're so much easier to get along with than people." Ellie gave a small sigh and shifted her weight. "Look, Mr. Zebb, my dear," he corrected, "but call me Dennis." "Dennis," she continued, "and I'm not your dear. Like I said, I'm closed right now. I'm sorry you're new to the city and that this is one of the first stops in New Zenith you chose to visit, but I'm afraid I can't give you any hospitality right now." She gestured to the door. "I'm sorry, but try again tomorrow. We open at 2 in the afternoon. I'd be happy to see you then." Dennis Zebb looked back at the door, then turned his violet eyes and his thin smile back to Ellie. "No." "Look, Zebb." She put aside the hostess and started using her boss voice. "I'm not serving you or anyone else tonight. I'm really tired, I've got a bathroom full of puke, and if this guy does kick the bucket, then I've got a serious problem on my hands. So I'm going to tell you one last time, turn around and walk. Would you mind doing me a favor, Miss Green? He pulled something quickly out of his pocket without missing a beat. Take a look at this coin here. It's a very old trinket, worthless, sadly, unless you can find someone who dabbles in the archaic arts. Then it's worth a pretty penny. No, I'm not looking at some stupid coin you have. Oh, come now, Miss Green, I insist. Violently, Dennis Zebb jammed the copper coin into her palm. Ellie felt a rush of cold crawl up her body. The chill started in her palm, then jumped to her toes and ran up her spine until it settled in her eyes. She looked down at the coin. She didn't want to, but she found herself doing it anyway. It was large, much bigger than a quarter and made of faded copper or brass. One side had a 5-pointed star on it. The other had a few symbols scratched in. They flowed circularly across the face of the coin. "What are those?" she found herself asking. "Runes," Dennis replied. "From a very, very old tongue. One that hasn't been spoken in centuries. I'll take my coin back now, Miss Green." Ellie had almost forgotten he was in the room. Her head had gone fuzzy and everything felt lucid and dreamlike. She looked back at Dennis Zebb. His beautiful violet eyes were glowing now, much sharper than they had been before. "It's the lights," she told herself. "It has to be the bar lights." Duke let out a small whimper, but Ellie paid him no heed. "Of course," she said. She held out her palm and Dennis snatched the little trinket back. "Thank you, Miss Green." He gave the coin a toss in the air and caught it. "Would you mind pouring me a drink?" "Of course," Ellie said a second time. She walked over to the bar, her legs feeling like they were pulling her more than anything else. "Would you like some wine, Mr. Zebb?" Dennis Zebb flipped the coin again and looked down at his hand. "No, unfortunately I won't be having that." "Whiskey, then?" Ellie asked. Another coin toss. "Yes, it seems that is what you'll be pouring me. I'll take a glass of the house whiskey on the rocks." "Single or double?" she asked. Dennis Zebb gave a small roll of his violet eyes and flipped the coin a third time. "Just a single for now, it would seem. Damn, I was hoping for more." Ellie brought up a small glass and poured the man a drink. "What is happening?" she thought, but the idea was quickly dashed away. Dennis Zebb swung a leg over a nearby stool and took a seat. He took off his overly large cowboy hat and set it on the bar as Ellie passed him the glass. "Leave the bottle," he instructed. She did. He took a first sip and gave a moderate nod of approval. "Now then, let's get straight to business, shall we?" The coin rolled back and forth across his knuckles, a talent only years of practice could have achieved. "You seem like a nice, hard-working woman, Miss Green, but the fact remains that I'm going to need this property for something that I have planned. This location is perfectly situated for a little project I've been working on for some time now, and trust me, it is huge. New Zenith, that's stop number 3 on my journey. The unfortunate thing for you, though, is that I'll have to either take this place from you, or you'll have to give it to me." He held the coin up between the two of them. Ellie merely stood with her mouth slightly ajar, listening to every word he said, but not really hearing any of it. "I can't move," she thought. "What is happening to me?" "So the real question is, what can I make you do? Heads, you sign the bar over to me and leave town for good, never to return. Tails, you go away, and I buy the bar as the new rightful owner. Deal?" Ellie gave a small and weak nod. Duke let out another whimper and stuck his head against her leg. She barely even noticed. "No deal," she thought. "Deal," she said. I knew you'd say that. Right, here we go. The coin flipped up into the air with at least 10 spins. Dennis Zebb never took his eyes off Ellie, nor did he drop his smile. It fell back into his hand and he took a look at it, a little disappointed with the result. Heads, he sighed. This is your lucky day, Miss Green. This is the sad part about making bets with yourself. You always have to follow through, regardless of the outcome. Zebb rubbed his eyes with his fingers and almost slammed a fist down on the bar. That kind of sucks. I was really looking forward to killing you. All right, no matter. Where's your office? Upstairs in my apartment, Ellie replied. Take me up there. The two went out of the bar and headed east to the building's side alley. Ellie opened the steel door and the two made the ascent up to her one bedroom. What is happening? She thought. Why can't I stop myself? What the hell has this guy done to me? She unlocked the door at the top of the stairs and the two stepped inside. Not bad, Dennis stated with a glance around the place, though it kind of screams lonely single white woman. All you need is a cat and a basket full of yawn balls and you've got all your bases covered. Ellie silently led him through her apartment. The office was right between the bedroom and the master bath. Ellie had been meaning to dress it up a little bit, but as of right now it was just a desk, chair, laptop, printer, small lamp, and a cup full of pens with a green shamrock on it. Ellie sat in the cushioned-back swivel chair, and Dennis leaned against the wall next to her, the coin rolling back and forth across his fingers the whole time. Now, he began, flicking on the lamp, turn on the laptop and let me know when you're ready to start writing. She did. Now, you have to do this in your own words, otherwise it won't be as convincing. But I'll give you the gist of what it is you'll be saying. He gave a brief pause as he got his thoughts together. I, Ellie Green, being of sound mind and body, do hereby transfer over my establishment of Green's Bar, located at 875th 7th Street, City of New Zenith, Colorado, to one Dennis Zebb. Mr. Zebb and I have been good friends for several years now, yada, yada, yada. I know he'll take good care of it from here on out. I'll be taking some time off, going wherever the fuck it is you feel like saying you'll be going. Please don't come looking for me, as I don't want any of you in my life anymore. Y'all suck, and I've grown tired of this city. P.S. I overcharge so many of you all the time. Or something like that. I kind of lost interest there. Zebb waited for Ellie to finish and then looked over what she had written. With a few words of approval, he had her print it out and sign it just so everyone would believe it. He added his own signature to it as a witness, and the two put on the date. March 19th, Zebb said out loud as he wrote it down. Perfect. Good job, Ellie. I especially like the part where you tell your staff that you were paying them less than they deserved this whole time. Nice touch. Ellie's face was as slate as stone. She couldn't show emotion, or twitch her mouth. She couldn't even speak. With each passing second, she felt more of herself slipping away from her. But why? She thought. All right, Ellie, Zebb continued as he folded the paper once and pocketed it. I'm going to need you to pack a bag and take a passport and any other form of identification. Need to make it seem like you're actually leaving to go somewhere in particular. Hop to it, I'll call you a cab. About 20 minutes later, Ellie, Dennis, and Duke were downstairs when the taxi pulled up. Dennis got the door for her, and Ellie stepped inside and put her bag down next to her. Come on, Duke, she said. She wanted to scream. She wanted to look at the cab driver and tell him what was happening. How she couldn't control herself. How this gambling man had cursed her or put some kind of spell on her. She wanted to throw her bag back out the door and beat Dennis Zebb to a bloody pulp right in front of her own bar. Then go upstairs and sleep like a baby. But she couldn't. She couldn't do anything he didn't want her to do. She patted the seat beside her to get Duke's attention. Come on, boy. We're leaving now. Duke took a few steps towards the cab. Dennis stuck his foot out in front of the animal's path. Miss Green, I've grown a little attached to this guy. He's just too adorable to give up. And I don't want anything bad to happen to him. He fixed her with his violet eyes once more, and they gave a small flash of neon as he smiled. You understand, right? Ellie nodded, her neck stiff and her mouth still ajar. She felt as drunk as Carl Wilkes. I figured you might. He gave her a wink and then stepped around to the driver. Ellie looked forward and saw him out of the corner of her eye. Thanks for getting here in such a hurry, my good man. One small favor to ask of you before you go, though. Can you just take a look at this coin for a second? No! Ellie felt her mouth twitch ever so slightly, but no words came out. No, no, damn you, don't touch it! The cab driver reached out and took it from the gambler. He held onto it for a few seconds, all the feeling draining from his face as he looked down at it. Dennis Zebb asked for it back, and the man complied without hesitation. Now, you're going to kill this woman, Zebb said. The calmness of his tone sent a chill up Ellie's spine. She heard Duke give another whimper from outside of the cab. But sadly, I can't just make you do it. So we've got two options here. Heads, you take her outside of the city to the outskirts with the mountains, and you either shoot her or run her down and bury her, or just do something to get rid of her out there. Or tails, you take her down to the river and the docks, and you drive the car off them. Now obviously in the tails option, you'll die too. So if I were you, I'd better pray that you get heads. The coin spun over and over in the air again as Dennis Zebb flipped it around. Please, God, Ellie silently pleaded. Please, someone, anyone, somebody help. He caught the coin and looked down at it. Well, 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 Zebb said with a smile. Looks like it's your lucky day, pal. He held up his palm and showed the driver the result, the 5-pointed star to signify heads. What's your name, anyway? Howard, sir, the cab driver replied. Well, Howard, looks like you're going to the mountains. Okay, that'll be an expensive trip. Oh, don't worry. By the time this fare is over, I think that'll be the least of your worries. He patted the cab door once and tipped his hat. Have a good ride, Howard. You too, Miss Green. Don't worry, I'll take good care of Duke and the place for you. Ellie could only watch as the cab pulled away from her bar. She saw Duke standing in the street near Mr. Zebb's feet. He hadn't stopped smiling this whole time, and his eyes looked even brighter now than when they had first met. My home, she could only think. She couldn't even say it. A tear ran out from her eye and dropped down to her shawl. He hadn't even let her change out of her cleaning clothes. Her gloves and boots still smelt of vodka and throw-up. Why can't I move? What is happening to me? There are many ways in and out of the city of New Zenith. Howard drove her to the most northern exit he could find. He's doing it. He's going to the mountains. Oh God, he's really going to... She couldn't breathe. Somebody! Anybody! The slums of New Zenith's northern side slowly went past the cab windows. No cab driver would go through this neighborhood. None that were in the right frame of mind. Ellie saw the eyes of homeless and junkies upon them. She heard a rabid dog barking, a bottle breaking, and what could have been laughter. Laughter that made her skin want to run away from her body. The exit stretch loomed before them. Ellie could see the dark peaks of the Rocky Mountains poking out over the once luxurious mansions of the north side, back when the area hadn't fallen to ruin. Their shadows seemed to engulf the entire neighborhood, even in the black of night. Her heart pounded inside her chest. Turn around, she begged in her mind. Please, please God, make him turn around. The buildings fell behind them as Howard zipped past. The road began to bend to the west as the terrain started shifting, slowly heading further and further upwards. A few crumpled newspapers blew out of the way, and Ellie glimpsed a wide green sign to the right of the road. Now leaving New Zenith. Hope to see you again, it read. One of the lights was burnt out, and someone had tagged the bottom left-hand corner, but she could still make it out. No, she thought again. No! No. The word escaped her mouth in a hoarse croak, like she was using her voice for the first time in years. She felt how dry her throat was and managed to shut her mouth for the first time in almost an hour. Steadily, her fingers curled into fists and she blinked several times, feeling more tears well up in her pupils. The veil was lifting. She could feel herself stepping out of the dreamscape that Mr. Zebb had put her under. "No," she said again, much more sure of herself this time. She turned her neck one way and then another, cracking it a few times and feeling her muscles tighten and relax. "No!" Once more she called it out. "No, no, no, no!" This wasn't going to happen. She wouldn't let it. Ellie knew she was back, and she was going right back to her bar, taking the double barrel out from behind the counter and putting 2 rounds right between Dennis Zebb's fucking ears. "Stop the car!" she yelled. He didn't. Howard didn't even seem to notice she had spoken. "I said stop the damn car!" Still no response. Ellie looked out the window at the rail that was speeding past them. They were starting their ascent up along the mountains, but had only just begun the journey. Still, this stretch of road was a single lane with no stop signs or streetlights. There was nothing that would force Howard to hit the brakes. Nothing but Ellie Green, that is. She leapt forward and grabbed his neck and shoulder with her puke-smelling rubber gloves. Ellie climbed over the medium of the car and reached for the handle. She had hoped that Howard would still be in such a daze that he couldn't even notice what she was doing. Ellie grabbed the wheel with her left hand, and Howard sank his teeth into her arm. Her scream split the night air as the car jerked slightly back and forth, Howard's bite becoming more and more intense with each passing second. Ellie saw blood start to trickle down from her forearm as his canines broke through her skin. "What the hell?" she yelled out. Awkwardly, with her free hand, Ellie grabbed the man bun he was sporting and pulled back on his head, desperate to get him off of her. No good, though. Pulling on his head only pulled on his teeth more and ripped her skin even further. The car started to drift to the left, Howard's attention no longer focused on the road. Ellie released his hair and just started punching him, hitting him in his eye and nose over and over while yelling, "Fucking let go of me, you fucking psycho!" She felt his grip loosen with each punch, and she finally managed to hit him enough times that she could yank her arm free. A few pieces of bloody skin were still hanging from his jaws. With her bloody arm, Ellie grabbed Howard's head and slammed it into the steering wheel. The car started to swerve again and went too far left. The guardrail came up quick and sparks began to fly along the left side of the cab. Ellie didn't care. She grabbed the driver's face and dug her thumb into his right eye, feeling it squish as Howard cried out in anguish. He may have still been under Zebb's control, but he felt it. Howard reached for her hand again and tried to bite it a second time, this time with no luck. Ellie fought for the steering wheel with her other hand as the cab continued to skid along the guardrail. She pulled it to the right, freeing it of the sparks, but Howard's foot was firmly planted on the gas and Ellie's figure was keeping her from getting to his feet. "Stop this damn cab!" she yelled. "Stop it right now! Fucking stop, you hear me?" That's when they started to turn sideways. Ellie had been too preoccupied with fighting Howard. She hadn't noticed that she had turned the wheel too far right and started to lead them up the mountain without a road underneath. The cab rose up on its right side until it almost completely fell sideways before the momentum took it. It started to flip and fell down hard to the left side. Ellie was pinned between the driver and passenger seat and felt every jerk of motion. The car must have skidded close to 30 feet before rolling onto the roof and coming to a halt. Dizziness was all that met Ellie as she tried to sit up. There wasn't enough space to move properly, and she had no idea where she really was anymore. She managed to spy the outside world and desperately crawled to her freedom, pulling her body over broken glass and bent scrap metal. The windows had completely bent in the crash, but Ellie managed just enough space to pull her plump form through one of them. She got to her knees and tried to stand, but her ankle felt twisted and one of her boots had fallen off. "Doesn't matter," she told herself. "Doesn't fucking matter." Limping, Ellie hobbled away from the wreck and began to descend back to the city. She left her bag behind, and it was only about 50 weak steps later that she realized Zebb had made her put her cell phone in it. doesn't fucking matter, she told herself, out loud this time. She was going to kill him. Whoever he was and whatever he did to her, she didn't really give a shit. All that mattered now was killing the bastard and taking back what was hers. Nobody muscled her around like that and got away with it. Nobody. They had driven a fair amount of distance, but Ellie managed to make her way back to the poorly lit sign. It helped that she was going downhill. Her ankle was killing her, and her steps were becoming more and more labored. The adrenaline was starting to fade, and she could feel the fresh bite that Howard had given her flare up worse and worse. But she didn't care. She was either too strong or too stubborn to stop moving. All that mattered now was seeing Dennis Zebb's head sitting on a mantelpiece. Another sign greeted her on the right. This one saying, "Now entering New Zenith, greatest city on Earth." Ellie glared at it through gritted teeth and kept hobbling down the paved road. She got to the sign's edge and stopped. She just stopped. "What the hell?" she asked the silence around her. She put all the weight on her good foot and tried to bring her injured one forward, but it wouldn't move. Try as she may, something was preventing her. She looked over at the sign and saw that she was perfectly in line with it, right on the border of the city. "What?" Ellie hawked up a wad of spit and shot it forward. It sailed past the border and dropped to the ground, no problem. "Well, why can't I cross?" she asked the darkness again. What the fuck is going on?" She yelled at the night air around her. She cursed and raised her fists. She backed up and tried to get into the city again, trying to go into it from every angle. She got off the road and tried from the grass. Nothing worked. "Why?" Ellie said, crying. Her frustrations were getting the best of her. "Why? What's happening to me?" She thought back to him then. Back to the gambling man, the one who had started it all. Dennis fucking Zebb. She hadn't been able to stop herself, but she had heard every word that he had said. She had been awake the whole time. "No," she moaned out loud. She fell to the ground on all fours, crying into the night air. "No, no, 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 no." She remembered now. One of the last things he had told her to do. His voice rang clear in her mind like he was standing right next to her. "Heads, you sign the bar over to me and leave town for good. Never to return. Never to return. Never." "No!" She heard a coyote howl in the distance, taking up the call of her stomach-churning scream. She had done exactly what he told her. She left town, and she could never go back. Her own body wouldn't let her. Boing! The crack broke through the silence, and Ellie gave a yelp of terror. Her body naturally flinched on instinct. A chunk of asphalt flew up next to her, and she rolled over to see who had fired the shot. Howard stumbled towards her, the right side of his face swollen and blood dripping from his mouth. She couldn't tell if it was hers or his. A silver six-shooter was in his right hand and aimed straight at her. A second shot cut through the warm spring night, and searing pain ripped through Ellie's left shoulder. She yelled out again and cursed every word she could think of while falling to the ground. She gripped her shoulder tightly while it welled up with blood and ran down her arm, all the while hearing Howard's footsteps get closer and closer. Desperately, Ellie reached out for something to grab onto and felt the chunk of asphalt that Howard had shot free from the ground. She wrapped her blood-drenched fingers around it and blindly chucked the stone. For one time that night, luck was on her side as she connected with Howard's forehead, just above his already bleeding eye. The cab driver buckled from the impact and collapsed, the hand cannon going off a third time and firing wide into the night. Just one chance. Ellie got up as quick as she could and half ran over to Howard. He was already trying to stand. With the savage yell of an animal, Ellie leapt onto him and drove her elbow into his chest. She heard him grunt as all the wind leapt out of his lungs. Ellie reached for the gun as Howard barely stretched it from her hand. With his left, he pushed back on her face and tried to reach down to her neck, each one desperate to hurt the other. Ellie felt what he was doing and bit down on his hand, drawing blood as he had just done to her. She struggled her way more on top of him and gave another few cracks to his face, smashing the back of his head on the pavement and finally loosening his grip on the pistol. She snatched it up and pushed herself, clumsily, back to her feet. "Okay," she yelled. "Enough! Don't fucking move an inch!" Howard was clearly disoriented and out of breath, but he still tried to push himself up from the ground. "I'm fucking warning you!" It didn't matter what she said. Howard fixed her with his one good eye and started toward her once more, half dragging both of his feet like the zombie he had now become. "Stop!" she yelled again. He didn't. "I said stop!" Her fingers squeezed down, almost without even thinking of it. The pressure flung her arms back just a touch as Howard bent at the waist. She had shot him in the stomach and could see the fresh red splat on his shirt. But he kept coming. Slower than before and unable to stand up straight anymore, but he was still coming. "Oh, come on!" She was desperate now. She had never murdered anyone. She didn't want to kill him, but what else would make him stop? Ellie raised the gun once more as tears began to streak down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Howard kept stumbling towards her, his one eye practically shining in the night. I'm so sorry." She closed her eyes and squeezed the trigger. The fifth crack echoed around the open mountain cliffside. Ellie kept her eyes shut, hoping that when she opened them, she would be in her bed and the whole ordeal would be a horrible nightmare. But she finally had to look, and it was still life that lay before her. Howard's body was collapsed a few feet from her, still and leaking red. Ellie panted in wavered breaths and dropped the gun to the ground. She fell to her hands and knees and half breathed, half screamed until there wasn't any will left in her body. Her entire form shook, and she felt the contents of her stomach push their way up through her throat and past her lips. Bile spilled out onto the dark road and dripped onto her already stained gray dress. She groaned and gasped while spitting the rest of the taste from her tongue, dry heaving a few times in the process. Her eyes were red and puffy from tears, and she was starting to feel the chill of the night air as the cold wind mixed with the sweat of her body. She was a wreck, exhausted and pushed to her mental and physical limit. She crawled a few feet, trying to find some sanctuary, but just gave up and curled up on the road, still crying and shivering as she balled herself up. The smell of vomit still lingered around her, now from her own puking fit. Despite herself, she couldn't help but hear Kyle's voice one more time telling her to smile. "Fuck you," she whispered in anger. "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you." The sobbing now came down worse than before. Ellie heard the howls of the coyote pack once more as she cried into the night. She couldn't say how long she was lying there for. Maybe 15 minutes, maybe a few hours. Eventually the well ran dry and she stopped crying and just lay curled up. "Okay," she whispered to herself. Okay. Come on, girl. Come on, get up. Get up. She did a small check of her body just to make sure she was still intact. Her forearm and shoulder were burning from the open wounds, and she was cold and covered in a variety of grime and bodily fluids. Her ankle also throbbed from how she had sprained it. The whole situation was getting worse now that her adrenaline had started to drop. But she still had all her fingers and toes. She was still in one piece, still alive. "Get up, damn it," she told herself again. "You're better than this. Get the hell up." Slowly, Ellie moved her arms and lightly pushed them away from her body. "Start with your hands. You can move your hands." She managed to roll herself onto her stomach and put her hands beneath her. They felt weak, but she had to push it. Now the feet. Come on, girl, you're not dead yet. Both her good and bad ankle cracked as she stretched and tried her feet out underneath her. With a few shaky pushes, Ellie Green brought herself back to her feet and took a few deep breaths, finally feeling her heartbeat settle. Ellie fell to the ground once more, smacking her chin on the pavement and biting the inside of her mouth. She gasped for breath and started to feel everything rush back that she had just shaken off. Tempting fate, Ellie managed to look over her shoulder and saw Howard on his feet again. His head was tilted to the right, and a hole now lay where his left ear had once been. Somehow, he was still kicking. "No!" she screamed through the sobs. She tried to get back up, to run as far into the mountains as she could carry herself. But she couldn't move her legs. She grabbed at the pavement and tried to pull herself with her hands, only managing to tear up her fingernails and rip them out. A firm hand came down on the back of her hair and yanked her head back with more strength than a gorilla. Howard flipped Ellie over so she was on her back. She tried to fight him some more, swinging her arms wildly at him. But she was done. There was no more strength in her. "Please," was all she could blubber out, her face a mix of dirt and tear lines. "Please, don't do this." It still didn't matter. Any humanity the cab driver once had was gone. He wasn't the one in control right now. Howard raised the gun and aimed the barrel at Ellie's face. She closed her eyes and moaned, praying silently. Howard pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing happened. Click, click, click. Ellie opened her eyes and saw Howard trying to shoot the empty gun. Soon enough, even he looked down at it and realized what was happening. For a split second, the two were dumbstruck. Ellie just looked up at Howard, and he, unsure of how to continue, looked back at her. They just stared at each other like that. One unable to move on her own, the other incapable of thinking for himself. Then he brought his boot down on her nose. Ellie felt the bones split and her head rang out as the world went black. Blood ran down the back of her throat. She opened her mouth and must have made a wounded animal sound as the boot came down a second time. Then a third. After the fourth hit, everything went quiet. Then on the fifth, everything went numb. End of prologue. Okay, everybody. That was the prologue for book 1 of Macabre Comics. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to try and make a new video every week. If I can't get it every week, then hopefully it'll be every month. So every 1 to 4 weeks, I'll try and put up the next chapter. If I can't do that, then I'll let you know why. But I really hope you enjoyed that. That went on longer than I thought. As I said, this is an experiment, so I'm learning stuff about this even as I go. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and there will be more in the future, so don't worry, the story will progress. It doesn't just end with Ellie Green dying on a road. Spoiler alert, she is dead. She's not coming back. That's the kind of story that this is. So yeah, stick around, and there will be more chapters coming out in the future. Cheers.